In Paul's epistle to the Hebrews, we read, "For when God made a promise to Abraham, since he had no one greater by whom to swear, he swore by himself, saying, 'Surely I will bless you and multiply you.' And thus Abraham, having patiently waited, obtained the promise. For people swear by something greater than themselves, and in all their disputes, an oath is final for confirmation. So when God desired to show more convincingly to the heirs of the promise the unchangeable character of his purpose, he guaranteed it with an oath, so that by two unchangeable things, in which it is impossible for God to lie, we who have fled for refuge might have strong encouragement to hold fast to the hope set before us. We have this as a sure and steadfast anchor of the soul, a hope that enters into the inner place behind the curtain, where Jesus has gone as a forerunner on our behalf, having become a high priest forever after the order of Melchizedek." So as Paul is writing to a group of Hebrews who had embraced Christ as the Messiah, he appeals all the way back to when the concept, the idea of Israel as a nation was formed. And that was when God called Abraham out of his idolatry in the land of Ur. So God appeared and appealed and spoke to Abraham and gave him a promise that he was going to send him to a land that he would inherit, that his descendants would inherit, which was remarkable considering that Abraham was already quite old, and his wife as well was very, very old. So by faith, Abraham trusted God's word and made that journey all the way across over into the land of Canaan, where he began digging wells, which is a sign of faith, a sign that Abraham believed what God had told him, that he would inherit this land and that his descendants would as well. So, because it was God speaking, there was no one greater to whom he could appeal but himself. So he basically gave the promise, because I've spoken, I will make these things come to pass. So Abraham patiently waited for a while, and eventually he faltered. He tried to bring about descendants by his own efforts, by sleeping with one of his wife's servants. And then eventually God blessed him with the promised child, Isaac. And from that point forward, after generations, Israel was formed, 12 sons, and God began blessing them with victory over their enemies. But there was many, many ups and downs where the people fell into sin, and because God is always faithful to his covenant, he said, "Blessing, I will bless you and I will give you these promises." But at the same time, when man is not faithful, God does not bless him and curses him instead. And all these details are laid out throughout the Old Testament. So, because it is God that's giving these promises, as Paul says, we have a steadfast anchor that we can put our hope in, knowing that God is always faithful, no matter what we do. That faithfulness will appear unfavorable to us at times because we've been unfaithful, and we'll reap the fruits of that unfaithfulness. So Paul closes the passage with talking about the temple, where eventually the temple was built and there was the curtain put in place that separated the Holy of Holies from mankind. And into this holy place, a high priest could go once a year, only after offering up a sacrifice, a blood sacrifice to cover his own sins. And then he could offer up a blood sacrifice to cover the sins of all of Israel. So Paul then takes the next step and shows how Jesus Christ is the perfect fulfillment of both of those situations where Jesus, as the high priest, did not need to offer up sacrifices for himself because he was and is sinless. But he went into the true Holy of Holies, the real one, not the one built by Solomon, and offered up the perfect sacrifice for all of mankind. And when Paul appeals to and explains that Jesus is a priest according to the order of Melchizedek, he's showing that what Jesus did was not just a matter of a thing for the Jews. It was because Melchizedek was not part of the Israeli nation, not part of the Hebrew people. He was a rather mysterious figure that God used to reach the entire world. So Jesus being a priest in that order means that his work was for all of mankind and not just for the Jews.